So we're looking at a range of 58 to 68 million per year for Brock Purdy, because that is where 21 to 25% of a $279.2 million salary cap would be. Well, Huntington Lake is not quite fully frozen over yet, but there is a lot of snow. It is already spring, and it's a good spot to talk about Brock Purdy and percentage of the cap. If you look at all the quarterback contracts on the A-list level that have been signed over the course of the past half decade, they've all fallen between 20.8% and 24.5% of that year's salary cap. So 2 years ago, the salary cap was 24% lower than it is now. That's when Joe Burrow signed his contract. It's $55 million a year, but that was on a much lower salary cap. So it ended up being 24.5% of the cap. Brock Purdy's deal, I think we're going to be able to look at this on the same scale, right? So now the cap is 279.2 million. 279.2 million at 21% would be about 58 million per year, and 279.2 million at 24.5%, like Joe Burrow, would be 68 million per year. Now, I'm not saying that Purdy's going to make 68 million per year from the 49ers. And I'm not saying that this is going to be something that eclipses Joe Burrow's percentage, but I'm saying that there is a range with which the 49ers and Brock Purdy will negotiate and are negotiating. And I think it's around 21 to 25% of the $279.2 million cap, which is $58 to $68 million per year. Dak Prescott's obviously at $60 million, but remember that Dak had crazy leverage coming off the franchise tag. He signed the deal, the morning of the season opener last year. Things are a little bit different in the Purdy realm, and they're different for most of the quarterbacks who have signed over the past few years, because a lot of these guys have had years left on their contract. Josh Allen had, 3 or 4 years left on his deal, but Purdy has 1 year left on his deal, and there are other QBs who have signed who have also had another year left on their deal, and that changes the leverage of the situation. Anyway, this is your 49ers alarm update. And I thought that featuring Huntington Lake and this entire area would be perfect, especially since my mom is such a good skier. Take a look at that. Perfect form, a lot better than mine. Also really good form at the Lakeshore Resort, which is fairly recently reopened with some of the best burgers and sandwiches. This is the club sandwich that my dad got that you'll have. Massive portions. You eat well at Lakeshore, right near Huntington Lake. Rustic up here in the Sierra Nevada. A good spot to talk about the 49ers after a busy week, especially after I dip down here to Shaver Lake, where the snow has melted. Spring has sprung. And you know how we did the Moody update? This was the background of the Moody update yesterday. It was really foggy. We couldn't see anything. Now today we can see all the way back to Mount Whitney. So 49ers news this weekend. Fred Warner doing his usual offseason boxing training. Patrick Willis has joined Fred Warner this time around. That was cool to see online yesterday. Willis and Warner, two 49ers linebacker greats. Willis, Hall of Famer. Warner, future Hall of Famer for the 49ers. And I was talking about Brock Purdy's contract and money a little bit earlier. I think as we're on this note of financial housekeeping, the Brandon Aiyuk deal. If the 49ers do trade him, which again, I'm going to emphasize this right now, is very unlikely because of the ACL and the MCL, that is a lot of savings for San Francisco over the course of the next several seasons. About $50 million in guaranteed money, or effectively guaranteed money, for Brandon Aiyuk would be shipped off to another team. But that's why it's going to be hard to move off of that money, because there's a lot of it, and Brandon Aiyuk is currently not yet fully healthy. But this is what the deal for an acquiring team would look like. And as we approach April 1st, I want to keep people apprised of the importance of that date. That is the trigger date in Brandon Aiyuk's contract, when the 49ers will have to absorb the vast majority of his 2025 pay as an option bonus against the salary cap. So it's going to prorate against the cap, and they're going to be stuck with that cap hit for this season. And the date at which the 2025 compensation for Brandon Aiyuk, also over $20 million, becomes fully guaranteed. So essentially 2 years, about $50 million for Brandon Aiyuk is going to turn into a guarantee on April 1st. That is the big trigger date to watch. The bottom line in this situation is that the 49ers, I think, in all likelihood, are best off keeping Brandon Aiyuk, because I just don't see how the outside interest would generate enough trade return for them. Keeping Brandon Aiyuk, given the financial situation, given the contract that was signed, and hoping that he returns to A-list status for this team in the 2025 season, or at least returns to big time contributions through the way that he separates, because that's what this team needs most. That's what Brock Purdy needs most. Any Brock Purdy contract has to be viewed in conjunction with the Brandon Aiyuk contribution, which is why the Aiyuk contribution came, or the Aiyuk contract came a year before the 49ers sat down and started trying to figure out this Brock Purdy situation. They go hand in hand, quarterback and receiver. Football is a team sport, and the 49ers need Aiyuk to spearhead the separation efforts of the receiving room in a way that sets their quarterback up for success. There's never been a quarterback in NFL history that hasn't needed quality teammates, that hasn't needed separation downfield. And we know the splits for the 49ers. They were still awesome against zone coverage last year. That's a testament to Brock Purdy, but they were really bad against man coverage last year. And that is an indication that they just didn't have the weaponry that they needed. And a lot of that started with Brandon Aiyuk not being available and traced back to him not being quite as good as he had been in 2023 to open the 2024 season. So moving forward, we've got a week before the owners' meetings. I'm going to be flying down to West Palm Beach. It's going to look a lot different in West Palm Beach than it does here at Shaver Lake. You can see the melting snow here. It's beautiful, California springtime. You can see Mount Whitney in the background. The state of Florida is the opposite, right? Florida doesn't have any elevation change. But I'll be in West Palm Beach for the owners' meetings. It's going to be a chance to talk to John Lynch. It's going to be a chance to talk to Kyle Shanahan. And it will be a chance to talk to Jed York about the 49ers strategy moving forward into this offseason. This is going to be a big moment in the offseason, since we're going to hear from York himself. And I've got a big article coming up tomorrow morning on the San Francisco Standard, where I'm going to be delving into some of the myths surrounding the 49ers financial strategy this offseason. At the current moment, they are at number 15 in total cash spent on salary in this 2025 cycle. But as soon as Purdy gets paid, assuming that there's going to be a good 60 to 70 million of year one cash coming in. I mean, Jared Goff's signing bonus was over $70 million. So I think you can expect a big signing bonus for Brock Purdy this year once this deal is done. Once that big chunk of cash comes in for him, once a big chunk of cash comes in for George Kittle, maybe even for Fred Warner this offseason, 49ers will be right back in the top 5 of cash spent. And they were number 1 last year at $334 million. So this idea that the 49ers are cheap is just really low level analysis. What we're seeing this year is a very typical financial reset for a team that got too old, too slow, too injured, and is simultaneously having to recalibrate things to be centered around a centerpiece A-list quarterback. And even with this financial reset, even with the 49ers making sure that a lot of the dead fat has been trimmed off, by the time that the dust is settled this offseason, they're going to be top 5 in cash spent again. They've been number 2 ever since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over. So, I mean, all of that is going to be discussed at the NFL owners meetings when I am in West Palm Beach. I think that it's fitting that we see the snow melting, springing right now. It's just like spring cleaning, spring house cleaning for the 49ers. They have trimmed a lot of the inefficiency. We've talked about why they've made some of the cuts and have opted not to re-sign some of the players that have signed elsewhere. And it's going to be very, very exciting for San Francisco entering the draft with 11 picks as they try to make this roster younger, better, faster, hungrier, you name it. Couldn't get much worse on the defensive front than they were last year. I expect over the next few months an all-out assault on the defense for the 49ers. I expect them to be obviously going big on draftees. I expect just a lot of moves in general, maybe even over the course of training camp. A lot of these might be what appear to be microtransactions on the surface, but they're going to be trying to get efficiency at every single corner. Picking up Trey Tomlinson off of waivers from the Rams, the 5'8" corner, was one great example of that for the 49ers. That happened right before free agency started. And then free agency, I mean, they signed 12 players. That is the that is the fourth most in the entire NFL. 12 signees for the 49ers in free agency, but at the lowest annual average value, 2.3 million per contract. And I delve into that too with Luke Farrell's contract that I look in at the San Francisco Standard tomorrow. But that is just an illustration of the 49ers trying to search for value everywhere that they can search for value this offseason, trying to make the draft as long as possible. They've treated free agency as an extension of the draft as they try to modernize this roster. So a lot of 49er strategy talk. We've done our time here up in the Sierra Nevada, up in the mountains. Why don't we finish this with a look ahead, 66 miles ahead as the crow flies to Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the 48 states, visible here from the big rock. The rock that gives us a nice location for 49ers updates, especially when there is no fog. You can definitely see Mount Whitney over 14,000 feet, all those miles away. Got it.